Have you ever found yourself standing at the edge of what seems like an insurmountable obstacle? Those moments when life's storms rage so fiercely that hope becomes a distant memory. We all face seasons of overwhelming challenges, times when our circumstances whisper that we are alone, that our struggles are too great to overcome. My friend, if that's where you find yourself today, I want to share a message that has resonated through the centuries. Don't lose hope. God is with you. Throughout Scripture, we encounter ordinary people who faced extraordinary trials. Their stories aren't preserved merely as historical accounts, but as living testimonies to a profound truth, that even in our darkest moments, we are never alone. God walks with us through every valley, every storm, and every seemingly hopeless situation. Today, we'll journey through the lives of 5 remarkable biblical characters who confronted overwhelming obstacles, yet emerged victorious because they held on to one essential truth: God was with them. Their experiences offer us timeless lessons about maintaining faith and finding hope when all seems lost. Let me ask you to imagine something for a moment. Picture yourself as a young person, filled with dreams and aspirations, your heart brimming with hope for a promising future. Then suddenly, those closest to you, your own flesh and blood, betray you. They strip away your dignity, your freedom, and cast you into a dark pit as if your dreams mean nothing. This was Joseph's reality. The beloved son of Jacob, blessed with prophetic dreams and his father's favor, found himself betrayed by his own brothers. Their hearts poisoned by jealousy, they sold him as a slave to foreign merchants traveling to Egypt, a land far from everything and everyone he knew and loved. If ever there was a moment to surrender to despair, surely this was it. Yet Joseph didn't. Why? Because deep in his heart, he clung to a fundamental truth: don't lose hope. God is with you. Genesis 39:2 tells us, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man." Even in slavery, Joseph didn't collapse under the weight of bitterness or resentment. He didn't allow the injustice of his circumstances to define his attitude or his actions. Instead, he kept his faith intact and worked diligently in the house of Potiphar, his Egyptian master. The Lord's favor rested upon him, and everything he touched prospered. But Joseph's trials weren't over. Just when things seemed to be looking up, another devastating storm crashed into his life. Falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit, Joseph was thrown into prison. Consider the compounding injustice: first betrayal by his brothers, then false accusations despite his integrity. In that cold, dark cell, surrounded by criminals and forgotten by the outside world, Joseph could have finally surrendered to despair. Yet even there, in what must have felt like his lowest point, Joseph continued to trust in God's presence. The scriptures tell us that the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Even in that place of confinement, Joseph's remarkable character shone through. He interpreted dreams for fellow prisoners, including Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, unknowingly planting seeds for his future deliverance. Years passed, long, silent years that must have tested Joseph's faith in countless ways. But those years weren't wasted. God was working behind the scenes, preparing Joseph for a purpose greater than he could have imagined. Eventually, through a series of divine appointments, Joseph was summoned to interpret Pharaoh's troubling dreams. His God-given wisdom so impressed Pharaoh that Joseph was elevated from prisoner to prime minister in a single day, becoming second in command over all Egypt. In this position of tremendous influence and authority, Joseph implemented a strategy that saved not only Egypt, but surrounding nations from a devastating 7-year famine. And in a divine twist that only God could orchestrate, Joseph's brothers, the very ones who had betrayed him years before, came to Egypt seeking food. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Joseph could have used his power for revenge. No one would have blamed him. But years of walking with God through hardship had refined his character and perspective. Instead of retribution, Joseph chose reconciliation. With tears streaming down his face, he revealed his identity to his astonished brothers and spoke these unforgettable words: You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." What profound spiritual wisdom. Joseph recognized that though humans may act with evil intent, God can weave even our most painful experiences into his redemptive purposes. Nothing is wasted in God's economy. No suffering is meaningless when surrendered to his greater plan. So my friend, when life seems like a never-ending struggle, when you feel trapped in a pit of despair or imprisoned by circumstances beyond your control, remember Joseph's story. Keep the faith. God is with you, just as he was with Joseph. Don't lose hope, no matter how dire your circumstances appear. God's presence can transform your darkest moments into a powerful testimony of his grace and favor. Trust that even when you can't see his hand at work, he is orchestrating events for your good and his glory. Your current chapter isn't the end of your story. Like Joseph, you may discover that today's painful pit is preparation for tomorrow's palace. Hold fast to hope, knowing that God is faithfully present, working all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Now, let's turn to another powerful example of faith in the midst of seemingly hopeless circumstances. Have you ever found yourself trapped between an impossible obstacle and an approaching threat? A situation where danger looms behind you, an impassable barrier stands before you, and there seems to be no escape in sight. This was precisely the predicament Moses and the Israelites faced at the shores of the Red Sea. After generations of brutal slavery in Egypt, God had miraculously delivered his people through a series of supernatural plagues. Under Moses' leadership, the Israelites had finally been released from Pharaoh's iron grip. Freedom was theirs at last, or so they thought. But liberation stories rarely follow smooth, straightforward paths. As the Israelites journeyed away from Egypt, Pharaoh's heart hardened once again. Regretting the loss of his slave workforce, he mobilized his army, the most formidable military force of that era, to pursue and recapture the fleeing Israelites. Imagine the scene as the dust clouds from approaching chariots appeared on the horizon. Ahead of the Israelites stretched the vast, impassable waters of the Red Sea. Behind them thundered Pharaoh's advancing army. They were caught in what military strategists would call a perfect trap. No escape route, no defensive position, no fighting chance against superior forces. Fear swept through the Israelite camp like wildfire. The people cried out to Moses in panic and accusation. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert.'" Their words reveal the depth of their terror and the fragility of newly birthed faith when confronted with overwhelming circumstances. Freedom seemed like a cruel illusion now, a brief taste of hope before an even more terrible end. It was in this moment of absolute crisis that Moses demonstrated unwavering faith in God's plan. Listen to his response in Exodus 14:13-14. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." What remarkable confidence! With destruction seemingly inevitable from all sides, Moses didn't scramble to formulate a desperate last-minute strategy. He didn't collapse in despair or join the chorus of complaints. Instead, he stood firm in his trust that God had not led them this far, only to abandon them. He believed that the Lord who had orchestrated their exodus would complete their deliverance. And my friends, that's precisely what happened. As Moses stretched his hand over the sea in obedience to God's command, the waters parted, creating a dry path through the midst of the sea. The Israelites walked through on dry ground, with walls of water standing like sentinels on their right and left. When Pharaoh's army pursued them into this supernatural corridor, the waters crashed back together, defeating the pursuing enemy completely. What appeared to be a trap became the setting for one of history's greatest miracles, and a testimony to God's faithfulness that would be retold for thousands of years. The message here is crystal clear. Trust God's plan, even when it seems impossible. Sometimes God allows us to face challenges that appear insurmountable specifically to teach us reliance on Him and to display His power in ways that leave no doubt about His sovereignty. When you encounter your own Red Sea moments, those situations where escape seems impossible and defeat appears certain. Don't lose hope. He may be working out a miracle beyond your imagination, just as he did for Moses and the Israelites. The God who parts seas and defeats armies is the same God who walks with you through your challenges today. He specializes in making ways where there seem to be no ways. His solutions often defy human logic and exceed our limited expectations. So, my friend, when life presents you with seemingly impassable barriers, when you feel trapped and hopeless, trust in God's plan. Keep your faith. Stand firm and be patient, for in His perfect timing, He will make a way where there seems to be no way. Your Red Sea may actually be an opportunity for God to display His incredible power and love in your life in ways you've never before experienced. Our third biblical example takes us from vast seas to a battlefield where a young shepherd faced a giant warrior who had terrorized an entire army. Have you ever confronted a challenge so intimidating, so overwhelming in its size and scope, that victory seemed utterly impossible? A giant in your life that cast a long, dark shadow over your dreams and hopes. We all encounter such giants, formidable obstacles that make us question our abilities and test the limits of our faith. For the Israelites serving in King Saul's army, that giant had a name: Goliath. The biblical account describes Goliath in impressive detail. Standing over 9 feet tall, clad in bronze armor weighing more than 125 pounds, wielding a spear with an iron point weighing 15 pounds. He was the ancient equivalent of a military tank. For 40 days, this Philistine champion had taunted the Israelite army, challenging them to send out a representative for one-on-one combat to decide the battle's outcome. No Israelite soldier dared to accept his challenge. Fear gripped their hearts, and they retreated each time Goliath approached. Enter David, not a trained soldier, but a simple shepherd boy who tended his father's sheep in the fields of Bethlehem. When David arrived at the battlefront to bring provisions to his older brothers, he was astonished by what he witnessed. How could the army of the living God cower before this uncircumcised Philistine? How could they allow God's name to be dishonored by this pagan warrior's taunts? What's remarkable about David's response is not merely his courage, but his perspective. Where others saw an invincible opponent, David saw an opportunity for God to display His power. Where the soldiers fixated on Goliath's intimidating size and weaponry, David focused on the limitless strength of the God he served. When King Saul finally granted David permission to face Goliath, he offered the young shepherd his own royal armor and sword. But David refused these conventional weapons, opting instead for his shepherd's staff and sling, tools familiar to him from protecting his sheep from lions and bears in the wilderness. David's declaration to Goliath reveals the source of his confidence. You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give it into our hands. With unwavering faith and remarkable skill born from years of protecting his flock, David hurled a single stone with his sling. The stone struck Goliath on the forehead, bringing the mighty warrior crashing to the ground. Using Goliath's own sword, David then cut off the giant's head, fulfilling his bold declaration and securing victory for Israel. This timeless story teaches us that no matter how small or ill-equipped we may feel, we can conquer the giants in our lives with God on our side. David's victory wasn't about his own strength or ability. It was about his unwavering faith in God's power and his willingness to step forward when others retreated in fear. So, my friends, when you face your own giants, whether they be fear, doubt, addiction, illness, financial crisis, broken relationships, or overwhelming challenges, remember David's example. Keep the faith and trust in God's power. In those moments when your circumstances seem insurmountable, declare with conviction, I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. Don't underestimate the power of faith and the assurance that God is with you. Don't lose hope. With God as your strength, you can conquer the giants in your life. Just as David's faith triumphed over Goliath, Your unwavering trust in God can lead you to victory in situations where defeat seems certain by human standards. David's story reminds us that the size of our faith matters more than the size of our problems. When you face your giants with faith in God's ability rather than fear of the obstacle's magnitude, you position yourself to experience God's delivering power. The battle belongs to the Lord. This was true in David's day, and it remains true in yours. So, take courage, dear friend. With faith in your heart, step forward to conquer your giants, knowing that God is with you every step of the way. He will not fail you or forsake you. The same God who empowered a shepherd boy to defeat a seasoned warrior stands ready to fight your battles today. Now let's turn to one of Scripture's most profound examples of maintaining faith through suffering, the story of Job. Have you ever experienced a season of life so filled with suffering and loss that you questioned the fairness of it all? Have you wondered why God would allow such pain in the life of someone trying to follow Him faithfully? Job, a righteous man described in the Bible as blameless and upright, experienced suffering on a scale that's difficult to comprehend. His story begins with a celestial scene, Satan challenging God about Job's motives for his faithfulness. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan asked, suggesting that Job's devotion was merely a response to God's blessings and protection. With God's permission, though within divinely established limits, Satan was allowed to test Job's faith through suffering. What followed was a tsunami of catastrophic losses that would have broken most people. In rapid succession, Job lost his wealth, his servants, and most devastatingly, all 10 of his children when a powerful wind collapsed the house where they were gathered. Shortly afterward, Job was afflicted with painful sores that covered his entire body from head to foot. In a matter of days, Job went from being a prosperous, respected community leader, surrounded by a loving family, to sitting among ashes, scraping his sores with a piece of broken pottery and mourning unimaginable losses. His suffering was so severe that his own wife advised him to curse God and die. Adding to Job's anguish was the arrival of 3 friends who, after sitting silently with him for 7 days, began offering explanations for his suffering, most of which suggested that Job must have committed some grievous sin to deserve such punishment. Their well-intentioned but misguided counsel only deepened Job's pain as he maintained his integrity while searching for meaning in his suffering. Throughout this agonizing ordeal, Job maintained his faith in God. Yes, he questioned. Yes, he lamented. Yes, he even demanded an audience with God to understand why these calamities had befallen him. But through it all, he refused to reject God or abandon his faith. In one of the most powerful declarations of faith amid suffering ever expressed, Job proclaimed in chapter 13, verse 15, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." And again in chapter 19, verses 25-27, he affirmed, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me." What makes Job's story so remarkable is his unshakable trust in God's wisdom and sovereignty, even in the face of seemingly senseless suffering. He yearned for answers, questioned why he was experiencing such tribulation, and honestly expressed his pain, yet he never abandoned his fundamental faith in God's goodness and justice. After extended dialogues with his friends, and finally a direct encounter with God himself, where God reminded Job of the limitations of human understanding compared to divine wisdom, Job humbled himself and acknowledged God's sovereignty. The story concludes with God rebuking Job's friends for their misrepresentations of him and restoring Job's fortunes twofold. Job received double the livestock he had before, 7 more sons and 3 more daughters, and lived another 140 years to see 4 generations of his descendants. The book of Job doesn't provide simple answers to the complex question of why the righteous suffer. Instead, it offers something more profound, a picture of authentic faith that perseveres even when understanding fails. Job never received a direct explanation for why he suffered, but he did receive something greater, a deeper revelation of God himself. So my friends, when you find yourself in the midst of overwhelming suffering and adversity, remember Job's story. God is with you. Don't lose hope. Persevere in faith even when it feels like your world is falling apart. Trust that God sees the bigger picture, and His plan may involve purposes beyond your current understanding. Job's story reminds us that even in our deepest trials, our faith can remain unshaken. Through unwavering faith, Job emerged from his suffering stronger and more blessed than before. Your trials too can be a refining fire that strengthens your faith and ultimately leads to greater blessings and a deeper relationship with God. Hold on to hope, dear friend, for God is with you, and He will see you through the storms of life. Your suffering is not meaningless, even when you cannot discern its purpose. Like Job, you may find that your greatest questions are eventually answered, not with explanations, but with a more profound experience of God's presence. Now, in our journey through these lessons of faith and hope, we've explored the stories of individuals who faced incredible challenges and found strength in their faith in God. But no message about hope would be complete without turning our attention to the ultimate source of hope and inspiration, Jesus Christ. Jesus, the Son of God, came into this world as the very embodiment of hope and redemption. His life, teachings, death, and resurrection powerfully demonstrate the message that has been our theme throughout. God is with you. Don't lose hope. The very name given to Jesus before His birth captures this truth, Emmanuel, which means God with us. In Jesus, God didn't merely send a message of hope. He became hope incarnate, walking among us, experiencing our joys and sorrows, demonstrating through His presence that we are never alone in our struggles. Throughout His earthly ministry, Jesus encountered people who were broken, marginalized, and in despair. He touched lepers whom society had abandoned. He restored dignity to women whom culture had disgraced. He welcomed children whom others dismissed as unimportant. He healed the sick, comforted the grieving, and offered hope to the hopeless. To the paralyzed man, Jesus offered not just physical healing but the deeper healing of forgiveness. To the woman caught in adultery and facing execution, He extended mercy and a second chance. To Zacchaeus, the tax collector rejected by his community, Jesus offered acceptance and brought salvation to his house. To the thief dying beside Him on a cross, Jesus promised paradise. In each encounter, Jesus demonstrated that no one is beyond the reach of God's love. No situation is beyond the touch of divine hope. His invitation still echoes through the centuries. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Perhaps the most profound example of Jesus' message of hope is found in His crucifixion and resurrection. As Jesus hung on the cross, beaten, mocked, and seemingly defeated, it appeared that darkness had triumphed over light, that evil had overcome good, that death would have the final word. His followers were devastated, their hopes crushed, their future uncertain. For 3 days, despair reigned. The disciples hid behind locked doors, fearing for their lives and mourning their shattered dreams. All seemed lost. But then came the morning that changed everything. Resurrection morning. The stone was rolled away, the tomb was empty, and Jesus appeared alive to His followers. Death could not hold Him. The grave could not contain Him. Sin and Satan could not defeat Him. In that moment of glorious victory, Jesus transformed the cross from a symbol of shame and defeat into an eternal emblem of hope and salvation. The resurrection of Jesus Christ stands as the foundation of Christian hope. But it is God's definitive declaration that life triumphs over death, that love is stronger than hate, that forgiveness overcomes sin, and that hope outlasts despair. Because Jesus lives, we can face tomorrow with confidence, no matter how dark today may seem. Jesus' teachings throughout His ministry emphasized the importance of faith, love, and forgiveness. He instructed us to love our neighbors as ourselves, to forgive those who wrong us, and to trust in God's provision. These principles provide not just moral guidelines, but a roadmap for finding hope and purpose in our lives. When faced with challenges, remember Jesus' example in the Garden of Gethsemane. Facing the horror of crucifixion, he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Even in his moment of greatest anguish, Jesus surrendered to the Father's plan, trusting that purpose would emerge from pain, that resurrection would follow crucifixion. My friends, Jesus is the embodiment of hope, the light that shines in our darkest hours. His life, death, and resurrection remind us that there is always hope, even when circumstances seem dire. Keep your faith in him, follow his teachings, and know that his love and grace are unchanging. With Jesus as our ultimate hope, we can face any challenge knowing that he is with us every step of the way. As he promised just before ascending to heaven, "And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." Matthew 28:20. As we draw our time together to a close, let's reflect on the powerful lessons we've gleaned from these faithful individuals. Joseph, Moses, David, Job, and ultimately Jesus all faced seemingly impossible situations, yet they never lost hope because they knew that God was with them. Joseph teaches us to keep the faith even when betrayed by those closest to us, trusting that God can turn intended harm into ultimate good. Moses reminds us to trust God's plan even when we're backed against an impossible barrier, believing that God can make a way where there seems to be no way. David encourages us to conquer our giants by focusing not on their intimidating size but on the limitless power of the God who fights for us. Job demonstrates that we can maintain our integrity and faith even through devastating loss and suffering, trusting in God's sovereignty when we cannot trace his hand. And Jesus, our ultimate example, shows us through his life, death, and resurrection that hope always has the final word. That light overcomes darkness, that life triumphs over death, and that love conquers all. I encourage you today, whatever you may be facing, to carry this message in your heart. Don't lose hope. God is with you. You are not alone in your struggles. The same God who walked with Joseph through slavery and imprisonment, who parted the Red Sea for Moses, who gave David victory over Goliath, who restored Job's fortunes, and who raised Jesus from the dead. That same God walks with you today. Keep the faith. Trust God's plan. Conquer your giants. Find strength in solitude. And fix your eyes on Jesus, the ultimate source of hope. With God by your side, there is always hope. Not just a wishful, uncertain optimism, but a confident expectation based on the character and promises of a faithful God who loves you more than you can imagine. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. May you know his presence in your darkest valleys and your highest mountains. And may you become a bearer of hope to others who are walking through their own storms. Remember, dear friend, don't lose hope. God is with you. And because he is with you, no night is too long, no pain is too great, and no challenge is too difficult to overcome. May his peace that surpasses all understanding guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus, today and always.